Florp. Do you hear that? It's the sound of new beginnings. Do you smell that? It's the smell of a fresh canvas ready to be painted. Ooh, do you feel that? It's the feel of limitless possibilities. Ugh, do you taste that? It's the taste of a mysterious and exciting future. Do you see that? It's a green screen background, carefully chosen by my editor, no doubt, to perfectly represent a new frontier, a road to adventure. Something exciting and motivational. All of this is, of course, because the calendar has turned over to a new year. 2018 has burned away, and from the ashes has risen 2019, and a new year means new... literally everything. More specifically for us, though, it means 365 days of Nintendo goodness. As I've said before, this year has the potential to be absurdly, stupidly amazing, considering the massive list of titles that are close to launching, or are actively in development for Nintendo's little system, and I won't list them here, you already know them all, except I totally will because I love to list them all. No More Heroes, Travis Strikes Again, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, Yoshi's Crafted World, Fire Emblem The Three Houses, Demon X Machina, Pokemon Gen 8, Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion 3, possibly Bayonetta 3, and even possibly Metroid Prime 4. And that's just the first and second party exclusive stuff. What about Doom Eternal? What about all those Resident Evil and Final Fantasy ports? What about Untitled Goose Game? What about Untitled Goose Game? Despite that lineup though, games aren't really what I want to talk about today. It's all very exciting, but right now there's something else that's got me looking down the road ahead and feeling mighty fine about it. If you watched my year-end review of 2018, you'll remember me mentioning how Nintendo recently ended their Creators Program and how that was a very good thing and that I would be later making a video on the topic. Well, I am here now with that very video. You are watching it right now. So let's talk about why this quiet, seemingly inconsequential announcement made over social media is a huge deal not only for content creators like me, but for anyone who's a fan of the Big N. Shortly after the launch of the Switch, Nintendo announced that Miiverse would not be coming to the system, and naturally, I, made a video about it. Just in case you missed the whole thing on the Wii U and 3DS, Miiverse was basically a native social media platform where every game had its own board and all the delicate little Nintendo-loving children of the world were shielded from the rest of the cold, cruel internet. I explained in my video how, while shuttering such a unique service was a little disappointing, it was potentially a very good sign. Forgive me if you've seen the video and I'm repeating myself here, but it's common knowledge that Nintendo doesn't always like to follow what the rest of the industry is doing, and they can be slow on the uptake when it comes to new technology. Take online play, for instance. At first, they ignored it, insisting that couch multiplayer was superior and probably hoping that the issue would just go away. Then, they dipped their toe into it with extremely limited online experiences in games like Mario Kart DS and Smash Bros. Brawl. Now, finally, they've embraced it fully, offering online play for most of their multiplayer games and what is at least supposed to be a fully featured online service. This service didn't end up being as great as I thought in my Miiverse video, and as I've said, I'll be talking more about that later, but even if they're kind of screwing it up, you can't say Nintendo isn't at least embracing the idea of online play. Why the heck can't we play this online is a phrase that used to be quite common, but is now significantly less so. As I talked about in my Miiverse video, they followed this same pattern when it came to social media, moving through 3 distinct phases. First, they ignored it, not understanding its importance. Then they dipped their toe in it, deciding to do it their own way with their own social media platform. Then they finally realized that social media is an enormous source of free advertising, and that limiting these social experiences to people who already had their systems and games was helping no one, so they ditched Miiverse and gave people the ability to share screenshots and video from their Switches directly to Twitter. In my video, I also pointed to Nintendo's views on YouTube and drew some parallels. Now, I don't know if you've been following all the drama, but let me tell you a little bit about what it's like to be a YouTuber. YouTube's got this system called Content ID, though I like to call it the copyright hounds. These hounds sniff around YouTube, identifying content that is held by copyright holders. They can sniff out a song or a clip from a show or a trailer or even a combination of things to figure out what they were lifted from. If a company so desires, it can have Content ID automatically flag any videos containing their copyrighted content, and if they do that, all revenue from those videos will go to the company. In the case of people re-uploading whole episodes of shows or using popular songs without paying for the proper licenses, this only makes sense. Copyright laws do exist even on the wild west of YouTube, and that kind of stuff just ain't allowed. Here's the thing though, using copyrighted content is indeed allowed under something called fair use. Uploading an episode of a show so that people can watch it is a no-no. But using clips from an episode of a show and analyzing it with your own voiceover playing over it most of the time is transformative. You've done something different with the content. You've presented it in a way that's entertaining by its own right. That is absolutely covered by fair use. Legally, I am fully allowed to use any piece of media that I want and feature parts of it in a YouTube video as long as it's transformative enough. That includes using Nintendo-related footage while I talk about it. Big problem though. On top of laws, YouTube is allowed to make up its own rules. Sure, I can analyze a show and not get sued or issued a cease and desist, but the hounds can still sniff out my video and funnel all of its revenue to whoever owns that show because YouTube has decided to side with the copyright holders in basically all cases, fair use or no. This is of course only one example of YouTube siding with the big companies and giving its creators the shaft. Whether it's copyrighted content or advertisements or even something like YouTube Rewind, the corporation places very little value on people like me and does everything in its power to make sure that if someone has to take the hit, it's us. Sounds a little harsh and perhaps even un-Arlo-like to say so, but ask any other content creator, it's 100% true. It's a literal fact. So what about Nintendo's relationship with YouTube? Well, you probably could have guessed this based on my whole 3 phases thing, but for a long time Nintendo was firmly planted in that first phase. They didn't like YouTube, they were scared by YouTube, they wanted very little to do with it. And you bet your buttons they had them hounds sniffing around every corner of the website for footage of their games. This was despite the fact that the gaming industry was seeing something of an indie renaissance thanks to YouTube. Tiny little games like Minecraft and Five Nights at Freddy's were turning into multi-million-dollar and even billion-dollar franchises, all because people were sharing videos of themselves playing. Companies often spend millions of dollars to advertise their games, but here, games were literally advertising themselves for no money. They were reaching vast audiences that they simply would not have reached 10 years ago. And it was around this time when it was becoming very clear that YouTube was the new Saturday morning commercial, the new gaming magazine, the new way for video games to find a huge audience. Nintendo dug in their heels and said, nah-uh. Very unfortunately, this was also a time when Nintendo could least afford to miss out on the next big thing. The Wii craze was entirely over and the Wii U launched with little fanfare, and thanks in large part to Nintendo's refusal to embrace this burgeoning internet platform, their brand was becoming less and less relevant. Every day, kids were growing up into brand new gamers with no real knowledge of what Nintendo even was. More and more content creators were being actively discouraged from covering Nintendo's games because they could spend a week or two working on a video and get nothing for it. The Wii U had a hard enough time gaining traction on its own, and the last thing it needed was for influential creators to turn away from it. Obviously, there were still plenty of creators making Nintendo content anyway, myself included, but this was a strong disadvantage that the Wii U was just not equipped to overcome. By the launch of the Wii U, Nintendo had indeed begun to shift into the second phase, with more and more content being uploaded to their official channel all the time. They grudgingly conceded that the platform could be useful, but it wasn't until the creation of the Creators Program that they made the move fully into Phase 2. The Creators Program worked like this. If you wanted to make videos about Nintendo games and still get ad revenue from them, you had to apply to the program on the Nintendo website. If you were accepted, you could plug each of your videos into it and run ads on them, but you had to share the revenue with Nintendo. Thing was, it wasn't an even split. Nintendo took most of it, and on top of that, you were only allowed to cover games from a small list of approved titles. Naturally, none of this was ideal in the slightest, but at least it was real proof that they had entered into the second phase. They were doing the YouTube thing, but they were doing it their own way. They were trying to control it as tightly as they could. It was the same thing they did with Miiverse. Unfortunately, this was still very detrimental to their brand. And if you want to know how this affected me, I'll tell you. I was lucky enough to figure out how to work around the content ID system for the most part. I discovered that if I kept my clips short enough and made sure I didn't have any Nintendo music playing for a long stretch without me talking over it, the hounds very rarely sniffed out my videos. Despite this though, I lived in constant fear. My Patreon patrons are the reason I've been able to make it this far, which is exactly why I will love all of them forever and always, but as much as I would love to rely solely on their support, I can't. Ad revenue is one of 2 keys needed to keep this channel running, at least in the same way that it does now with more than 1 video a month. And pretty much this whole time, ever since I've made a career out of complaining about children's games on the internet, I've worried about how things could go wrong at any single moment. All it would take was YouTube updating their content ID system so that it could detect shorter clips to bring my channel to a very sudden halt. Or even worse, copyright holders can manually flag videos if they just take the time to do so. What if one day my channel became just big enough for one dude sitting at a desk at Nintendo to add me to his list, and from then on he would bring up my channel once or twice a week and just bloop, flag each of my videos with a touch of a button. There would be no getting around the system at that point. My goose would quite simply be cooked. Arlo stuff wouldn't end completely. I'll always love making videos, but it wouldn't be anything close to what it is now. There's the chance that I would be able to build up enough extra Patreon support at that point to keep things moving, but it's also possible that I would need to get a different job and downgrade the channel to an occasional hobby project with mostly topical reaction videos and very few lengthy discussions. And I do not like that idea. If I'm gonna complain on the internet, I wanna do it 40+ hours a week. So when Nintendo dropped that tiny Twitter bomb at the end of November, the relief I felt was immeasurable. They just popped in to say that they were ending the creators program and they would no longer be claiming videos featuring their content. And I was just like, what? Am I dreaming? Is this real? Is this reality? I can move forward without worrying about things coming crashing down around me at any second? That's a thing now? I can use footage of Nintendo games and trailers without chopping them into tiny bits to keep them hidden from the hounds? Now all I have to do is worry about Content ID randomly insisting that the battle music from Ocarina of Time is a Megadeth song? Because no joke, that's a thing that happened. I'm not just here to talk about my own channel though. This shift in Nintendo's thinking has much greater implications for the company. Like I said, in my Miiverse video, I actually drew comparisons between Nintendo's attitudes regarding social media and YouTube, and I even theorized that if Nintendo was in phase 2 of YouTube acceptance, they might soon move all the way into phase 3. It turns out I was right. They've done it. And as it was with social media acceptance, it's more evidence of a Nintendo that's constantly improving. It's their policies, it's their hardware, it's their software, it's their marketing. They're always getting better. Obviously, the Switch itself has been the herald of a giant shift in the company. And as I've talked about before, we know that there have been big leadership changes in the past few years that no doubt have improved the company dramatically. It's a very tired phrase by now, but still I must say it, no, Nintendo ain't perfect and they're never gonna be perfect. They're still capable of making mistakes or doing what I feel is just the wrong thing to do. And sometimes those wrong things leave me slightly worried, as you also might have observed in my 2018 year-end review. But it always feels good to know that even if they have this weird tendency to get stuck in the Stone Age when it comes to certain industry trends and innovations and whatnot, overall they're moving forward. And not only are they moving forward, but they're doing so at a much faster rate than they have in the past. And I don't know about you, but that excites me, especially here at the start of a new year. What other ways might they improve? And of course, now that Nintendo content is free game on YouTube, will that have an impact on the kinds of videos we see? Will we start seeing even more new Nintendo-themed creators springing up out of the ether? Now that the Switch has made Nintendo relevant again, will YouTube help propel it to even greater heights? Will some mega huge YouTuber play Luigi's Mansion 3 and scream the whole time, and suddenly 30 million kids go out and buy Switches? I don't know, but I can't wait to see. I mean, that last one probably isn't super likely, but you never know. Of course, while we're talking about it though, there is one improvement in particular I'd like to see over at Nintendo. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3 in 2019? Well, what do you say, my friends? Are you as excited about this whole YouTube thing as I am? Let me know what you think down in the comments, and be sure to let me know what your New Year's resolution is too. Want to know what mine is? To rip on Kirby Star Allies at least once in every single video. More like Kirby Star Al... lame. Ha!